I think tonight's going to be eye-opening for a lot of people. I really do. I think, Amy, since you and I met, I don't know how long, it's got to be over a year ago, I think, that I first kind of connected with cell science and you. And it's just been eye-opening, all the different things. And we have coaches, that they take a couple clients through it and just opens their eyes. I know Joe has a client that they did the CNA, and a couple things that he was prescribed by a doctor, he was on his list, and he was prescribed by a doctor to take them. Now, we're not doctors, so our advice is, hey, maybe take this report in and show this to your physician, because this is not maybe the ideal scenario for you. So it's
Hmm.
just really been a wealth of information. So I thank you and really
Sure.
appreciate all that you're doing for us.
Well, thank
And
you. My pleasure.
yeah,
Well, thank you. Thank you for, using this test, these tests, because, like you said, it takes so much guesswork out of, what any kind of nutrition professional um needs to suggest for their patients to get them to feel better and to promote optimal health. So it does take all the guesswork out. It's wonderful to have access to this testing.
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So, Joe, I'm going to run through Amy's bio here briefly. Did you have anything before we get started? Because once I turn it over to her, I don't want to interrupt her or anything like that. So, do you have anything before we get started?
You're darn right I do. No, Amy, we can't thank you enough for this.
Aw.
One, I've missed our conversations.
Aw.
Not that we can't set up anymore. Um, but Amy has a special talent with explaining. Guys, this is a complicated topic. But yet it doesn't need to be. We can really simplify it, but it is a integral part to people's health. And the amount that I have learned personally, I mean, every time we did consultation calls like this, I filled up my notepads and I learned something every single time. And anybody on the call that has worked with me directly, I'll just tell you now, if anything sounds familiar that Amy goes through, just know that she stole it from me. And so,
Or the other way
but
around. I
no,
mean, whatever.
you're right. No, the amount that I learned, which in turn, obviously, we can, go on through clients and go on and pass that on. But I know I'm going to probably take more notes and probably on the, anybody on the call. And I know I'm excited to learn. And you guys have a very, very knowledgeable person to listen to here. So, Amy, we can't thank you enough.
Aw, thank you, Joe. It's my pleasure. Really, thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe. So I will kick us off here, officially get us started, and let you take the wheel here, Amy. So Amy Pizarka, RDN, CDE, CCN, IFNCP, has over 40 years. Let me just pause there.
Could do pretty good.
I'm going to mute
Yeah,
everybody.
I think so. I don't know.
Let's see. There we go. Amy, I did mute you, so when I get done here, you'll have to unmute yourself. I just muted everybody. So once again, Amy has over 40 years experience as a dietitian, nutritionist, co-creator and director of Preva Medica Nutrition Services. She leads the team of nutrition and health professionals that deliver customized nutrition and lifestyle support. We do engage in her services and her team to help us with customers, clients that come to X Factor Labs and have these tests done. One of the things that I love about partnering with Cell Science and Preva Medica is the ability to not just run these tests, but the ability to explain them and give you actionable items from there. And Amy does a wonderful job. Amy's coming to us tonight from Pennsylvania. That is where she's from. She's provided nutritional therapy, believe it or not, I believe it, to 7,000 patients and delivered over 600 public presentations. Lastly,
Well, I'm old.
well, so am I, but so
Been around a long time.
she's earned her BS in nutrition and medical dietetics from Pennsylvania State University and completed her dietetic internship at St. Luke's Hospital in Milwaukee. She's been an RDN since 1985. So she's
See.
also a certified diabetes educator, and specializes in gut health, digestive disorders, food sensitivities, adverse food reactions, weight management, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, and preventative functional nutrition. So, with that, Amy comes to us with a wealth of knowledge. I've had the privilege of being on several calls, helping educate and train our coaches to help our clients, but also very personal. Amy and I went through these exact tests with my wife as one of the first clients to go through that. And so, with that, Amy, thank you for graciously spending your time with us tonight. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jim and Joe and everyone. Thank you very much for the kind words and for asking me to be here. It's my pleasure, really. I'm glad to be with you. So what I will be discussing tonight are a few tests that we are very fortunate to have access to. I actually Jim mentioned Previmedica. So what I do is I oversee a team of nutrition professionals, and we're really a division of the laboratory who does the testing that I'm going to show you tonight, and as well as a bunch of other testing you might be interested in, but we're going to focus on two especially that you might be interested in, and we're quite familiar with utilizing this testing. Then we use the testing in our plans for our patients. Again, help them to address the issues that they might be coming to us for, and just for overall wellness and to promote optimal health. The first one that we'll look at is what you see on your screen here. Everyone can still see me that I'm sharing the screen, right? Okay. The methyl detox profile. So you might have heard of methylation. It just seems to be a real hot topic these days. So it's a very, very popular test with us. There are people all over the place, influencers all over social media talking about methylation. And, so again, this is a very popular test. So what is methylation? Well, it's a biochemistry. It's a biochemical pathway, and it does take place in every single one of our cells, every single one of our cells. And it happens, it's constantly happening, happens like 1 billion times per second. And I know it looks complicated here, but I always suggest that you just think about it broadly and what this pathway goes on to impact. It really has far-reaching impact. It can impact every single one of the organ systems in the body. It goes on to impact, the way you detoxify. It impacts your brain chemistry. It impacts your hormone balance. Again, the way your liver detoxifies. It impacts how much histamine you have in your body, your tendency for inflammation, your cardiovascular health. Homocysteine, you might have heard of homocysteine tests as well. It impacts that. So, if you are a person who, you're interested in knowing, why or what could be contributing to fatigue and to brain fog, anxiety, sleep difficulties, irritability, attention issues. If you do have an elevated homocysteine level, if you're someone who you feel you're not, here's one. If you feel that you don't tolerate scents, like if if you're, in a show or in church, I always say, I'm in church and I feel like I sat next to somebody who bathed in perfume. So if you're really sensitive to smells, or you're sensitive to supplementation, you react really, really strongly to alcohol and to chemicals and the medications. This might be the test for you. Family history of cardiovascular disease. If you just are not, you don't tolerate stress very well. I mean, there's bound to be something on that list that I mentioned that might be, something that you're dealing with. So this pathway goes on to impact, again, just about every organ system in your body. So it can have really far-reaching impact. Now, what it is looking at is these 5 color-coded rectangles that you see are the genes, the 5 of the genes that this laboratory chose to focus on when they developed this test years ago, because those genes are the ones that are most common to have what are called variations in them, or little changes from the original gene. And then it can go on to impact all those functions that I talked about, the way you detoxify, your brain chemistry, your hormone balance, and so forth. So what these genes do, these five color-coded rectangles here, they act as enzymes. And just what that means is enzymes in a pathway like this, they just go on to drive the process to the next step. So they're responsible for controlling the part of the process where they occur. But think about it as like a snowball effect. That what you see at the bottom of the page here, where you see MTHFR. If there's a problem with that gene working, it's not working as well, it's going to have what they call downstream effects. So it's like a snowball effect. It's going to impact how you detoxify. Even if the other genes are working very well, it might impact how you detoxify, your hormone balance and your brain chemistry and so on and so forth. So this color code here is telling you what you inherited from your parents. Now remember, we can't change what we get from our parents. Can't change that. So and this is definitely more complicated than the way I describe this, but there are two types of genes that you can inherit from your parents. You can inherit what's called the normal gene, or what we also call the wild type, WILD. Or you can inherit what's called a variation or a variant, a slight change from that normal gene. So if there's the normal genes, what should be happening is that enzyme activity that gene is responsible for should be working well. But if there's a variation in the gene, that just means that it's not working as efficiently. The enzyme activity is reduced a little bit. So now the color code tells you what you got from your parents. Green means, like, this person is green for this AHCY. That means that both of this person's parents passed on the wild type. So that gene should be working pretty well. Should be working at 100% because they got the normal gene. Now, yellow means that this person got a variation from one parent, and then the other parent passed on the normal or the wild type. So keep that in mind. Each parent has two genes to pass on, two versions of the gene, but they're only going to pass on one each. So one parent for the COMT, the COMT, the yellow, one parent passed on a variation, the other person passed on the wild type. MTR, this person's yellow there too, one parent. It doesn't necessarily need to be the same parent. It could be the different parent. It could be mom in the first one and dad on the next one. But when someone's yellow, that means that the enzyme activity is reduced somewhat. So, then of course that can go on to impact all those functions that I mentioned, what methylation is important for. Now red, like this person is red for MTHFR and MTRR. That means that this person, both the parents passed on a variation to this person. And what that means is then the enzyme activity is reduced even more than if it was just the one parent passed it on. But I always like to point out that this is really not gloom and doom. And I do think, I don't know why, I guess because of the influencers on social media, but they kind of they instill fear in people. And when they find out, oh my gosh, I got the MTHFR, oh my gosh, this is horrible. No. This is so common that I feel it's more common to have variations in these genes than not. And I always share this story every time just to kind of put it in perspective. But I've been looking at these test results for this laboratory since they came out with this test in 2016. So it's 10 years. And it's only been, now I'm up to 12 times, but only 12 times that I've ever seen somebody green for all of these genes. So again, we think about it. I haven't seen everybody's results, but I've seen thousands over the last 10 years. And I've only seen 12 people who are green for all these genes. And the one person I will never forget, I don't remember any others except for this one man, because he was really rude and nasty to me as I was going over his results. And he was green for all these genes. And I knew as I was talking to him that he did not have balanced methylation because, well, first of all, I figured he had some neurotransmitter imbalances, because in brain, remember this impacts brain chemistry. And he also had cardiovascular disease. This pathway impacts cardiovascular health. He had a high homocysteine level. So you see where the homocysteine is right here in this pathway, right underneath ACY. He had a high level. That's an indication of homocysteine. And he didn't sleep well. He was obviously irritable, and he was just an angry person. And he said to me, I wasted my money. I should not have done this test. And because I don't have any problems with methylation. And I said, well, number one, there are other genes to be assessing in methylation besides these five. And I should have said that to you all. There are other genes besides these five working in methylation, but these are the five that are very common to have variations in them. So that's why this lab looks at them. I said, that's number one. But number two, I said, if you keep eating the way you're eating, I don't care what your genes say, you will never have balanced methylation because you need to still provide the nutrition to your body. Your genes are not just going to do the work without nutrients to drive this biochemistry. Because this guy was eating ice cream all day, drinking soda all day, eating hoagies and cheesesteaks. He was from Philly. And I said, you still have to provide the nutrients for your biochemistry. So my point being that our genes do not define us. Genes are not our destiny. It's really about the lifestyle that you choose, the nutrients, how you nourish your body, which we're going to talk about, and how those nutrients and how your lifestyle impacts how your genes get expressed. And that's something that's called epigenetics. Epigenetics is your lifestyle that you choose and how it interacts with your genes and how that determines how your genes get expressed. So keep that in mind that this pathway is called an epigenetic pathway. It's not about, oh my gosh, this is definitely going to be a problem because I have variations. No. We just have to look at your nutrition status and your lifestyle and what you're supplementing with, what you're eating and what you're supplementing with. And that's going to help you to have balanced methylation, even though you have variations in these genes. So that's kind of the overview of the methyl detox pathway. Let me show you the second page of this test result. I'm sorry. So hard for me to just operate this laptop. Okay, so then page 2 will tell you what variations that this lab looks for and what the patient got. So this patient, you see where it says C677T, A1298C. Well, those are the actual variants of two of the variants of the MTHFR gene, and this person got, both parents gave him the C677T. So, the next page will tell you that, which variants they checked for and which ones the person got. But what I really like is this page here, because this tells us, and this is where we're going to start jumping over to the next test, because this tells us, well, what do you do about it? How do we support it? How do we make sure that this person still has balanced methylation, even though they have these variations in the genes? And by the way, I didn't mention this, but on the first screen, there was, you saw the homocysteine. If you do this test, you never have to look at those 5 genes, the variations in the 5 genes that are tested in this test. You never have to look at them again because they're not going to change what you got from your parents, what you inherited. How they get expressed could change based on your lifestyle. But, you don't have to look at the testing ever again. This is a one-time thing. But the homocysteine level, that's a great biomarker for you to keep checking in on from time to time to determine, do you have balance? Is that, do you likely have balanced methylation or imbalanced methylation? Because homocysteine directly impacted by this methylation pathway, and homocysteine is, it's an amino acid. And you've likely heard of it. Maybe you had it measured already. Maybe your doctor did the test. It's a pretty routine test. And this laboratory who does this test, they also do homocysteine. But it'll tell you if it's too high, that tells us, yeah, you're probably having some problems in the methylation pathway. So we've got to look at that. So it's a good biomarker for you to, maybe assess every 6 months or so, depending on what it is. So if you go to do this test here, I would encourage you the first time to at least to do a homocysteine level along with it, because if your homocysteine is high, we want to take steps to get it down, because too much homocysteine in your blood tends to damage and put nicks into your artery walls. It's kind of like, putting nicks on the wall, when you bump into the wall and you take a little part of the paint out of the wall. Well, little nicks out of your arteries, just like you go and you plaster, you cover up a hole in the wall. Well, that's what happens in the arteries. The big inflammatory response happens with elevated homocysteine in your blood. All these white blood cells gravitate to that nick in the artery walls. Well, that's inflammation, and that really is what increases the risk of stroke and cardiovascular disease. So that's why it's a good idea to have that homocysteine looked at as well. And because if it's too high, we want you to get retested like every 3 months until it comes down. We take steps nutritionally and with lifestyle to get that number down, but keep checking in on it every 3 months until that homocysteine comes down to the ideal range, which is, by the way, ideal is definitely under a 10 for your homocysteine, but even more optimal is a 5 to an 8. So you can keep that in mind, because you might have had a homocysteine done with your physician, and most of the conventional labs will accept under a 15 as being acceptable, because that's what the American Heart Association accepts. But you want it ideal, you want it under a 10. So back to this page. This is where you can really make things happen here, because it'll list all the genes that you have variations in. So you notice that it's the 4 genes that this patient had variations in. They're not going to list the ones that are not. There's no variations in. And then they tell you, what do you do about it? So look at the first column. It says address the need for, and you see the first gene here, COMT. Well, address the need for means find out if you need it, or find out if you have enough, but or find out if you don't have enough of these particular nutrients that help the COMT enzyme, this COMT gene, to do its job. Notice it does not say, hey, just start supplementing with a whole bunch of magnesium, and just start supplementing with methionine without even taking any look to see if you have a good level. No, because you know what? Too much is not good either. So there's such a thing as hypomethylation, not enough methylation, and there's such a thing as hypermethylation, too much. You do not want too much methylation. So, practitioners who will say, you know what, you got the MTHFR, I'm variation. I'm just want, you need to take 2,000 micrograms of methylfolate. Yeah, no, what if you already have enough? Just because you have the variation doesn't mean that we have to intervene. Let's find out if you have enough of these nutrients that help these genes to do their job. So then we're going to start jumping over to the next test. We're going to go back and forth, because we're looking at COMT here, and it says address the need for methionine. That's an amino acid. Address the need for COMT. All right, so let's go over to your CNA test here, and let's look right here. You see over here with the methionine underneath the amino acids. Yeah, we're going to look at this test in more detail. But you see, I don't know if you can see methionine. It says borderline insufficient. Okay, so it's insufficient. So I say, this person has COMT. Okay, COMT variation. Yeah, you don't have enough methionine for the COMT to do its job. You're not supporting it. Not only do you have a variant, but now you got insufficient methionine. We got to get more methionine. And now the other nutrient that we're supposed to check out to help COMT is magnesium. So look at the magnesium for this person, right underneath minerals, second column. It's in the green, but I'm going to explain this later. It's kind of hovering on being insufficient as well. It's in close to the yellow. So I would say this person doesn't have enough magnesium either. So there you go. I would say, well, you know what? Guess no wonder. And with the COMT gene, no wonder you feel anxious. You have panic attacks, and you're not sleeping well. You tell me you're irritable, that kind of thing. That because that particular enzyme, COMT enzyme, has a lot to do with the brain chemistry, and you've heard of dopamine and norepinephrine, but it's not only the COMT. Okay, well, we got to provide it with the right nutrients. Yeah, sure enough, this person does not have enough of the nutrients that are most important to help the COMT do its job. So back to here. All right, so now we know we need to get this person more methionine and magnesium, not just because he has the COMT variant, but because we did the nutrient test that shows he doesn't have enough methionine and magnesium. Then look at the next column where it says food first. It's just listing the good food sources of methionine. It's an amino acid, and amino acids, as you likely know, come from protein. So it's just listing protein sources. But look at where it says that this is a little feature about COMT that's unlike the others. So check it out. High doses of these substances called catechins in tea, especially green tea. And then you might be familiar with this nutrient here. It's a phytonutrient called EGCG. It's abbreviated EGCG. It comes from green tea. Well, guess what? Too much of that inhibits, reduces that enzyme activity of the COMT even more. So, we have these people say, hey, green tea is awesome. Green tea is a great antioxidant. Green tea is awesome for metabolism and all that. Well, that's true. But for a person with the COMT variant, it could be disastrous if they take in too much. And it could exacerbate the symptoms that the person with the COMT variant very often reports, like anxiety, panic, sleep difficulties, irritability, attention issues, things like that. So too much green tea is not a good, too much black tea too much EGCG, not a good idea necessarily for somebody with COMT. So if I'm working someone with this COMT variant, I would say, if I find out that they've been drinking, gallons of green tea every day, I said, well, how do you feel? Oh my gosh, well, I don't sleep. And this has nothing to do with the caffeine either, by the way. It's the catechins in the tea. Well, I don't sleep well since I started doing that. Or, my anxiety is through the roof. Okay, if I were you, I would back off that green tea. But not as much in food. I don't really hear people drinking gallons of green tea that much, but every so often. But the EGCG definitely in supplementation, be on the lookout for that. And then quercetin. You see quercetin here in this box too. Well, quercetin you might be familiar with. It's a wonderful nutrient. It's an immune supportive nutrient. It's all over the place in plants. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't eat plants, but supplementing with quercetin is something that became very popular during COVID because it's an immune supporter. But quercetin high dose in supplementation inhibits that COMT enzyme. So be on the lookout for that. If you're a person who's been supplementing with quercetin, I wouldn't say, oh, you should be doing that if you have a COMT variant, but I would ask you, how have you been feeling since you've been doing that? Most of the time, especially if it's high dose, most of the time people will be saying, I feel terrible. Oh my gosh, maybe it is the quercetin. So that's a little detail about the COMT variant that's unlike any of the others. So then we're going to do the same thing with the rest of these nutrients or the rest of these genes. You see MTHFR, you see MTR, MTRR, and it tells us what nutrients to address the need for. All right, so we're going to jump back over to the cellular nutrition assay and let's look at for this person's MTHFR. We're going to look at methylfolate, vitamin B2, which is riboflavin, niacin, magnesium, and zinc. Niacin is B3. So let's look. All right, so looking at the vitamins at the top, well, you see where it says vitamin B9? That is that's the methylfolate. So sure enough, this person doesn't have enough because he's got the MTHFR variation, I would imagine. I mean, I know he does, but I would imagine that's why he's got insufficient methylfolate because that MTHFR gene is necessary to convert one form of vitamin B9 into this active form. So he doesn't have enough. So there we go. We got to get him more methylfolate. And then the riboflavin is the vitamin B2. It's fine. His vitamin B3, fine. You see what I mean? So why intervene with B2 and B3? He's fine. But yeah, methylfolate. And then his zinc, that's necessary for MTHFR function as well. He's great. But magnesium, we already know he's not. Now, back to here, because I want to point something out. For those of you who find out you have an MTHFR variation, maybe you already know, but if you have an MTHFR variation, look over to the far right column over here where it says avoid folic acid in supplements and fortified foods. So, folic acid is the inactive form of vitamin B9. Let me show you back to page 1. See over here, bottom left, where it says folic acid over here. Well, look at what's happening. Your cells can't even use folic acid. So when you look at a label of what I call junk, like white bread, junky sugary cereal, white pasta, you look at that, it'll say fortified with folic acid, right? Well, that's what our country did in the food fortification program many years ago to reduce the risk of birth defects. Okay, they use folic acid. Why? Well, because it's synthetic and it's cheap, but guess what? It has to go through, your cells can't even use it. It's got to go through this conversion process, and you see the MTHFR, and then it gets converted into what you see in that green outline box. That's methylfolate. That's what this process needs, is methylfolate for methylation. All right, well, if the MTHFR has a variation, this person, if he consumes folic acid, not all the folic acid he consumes is going to get converted into the active form because he's got the variation. Yeah, so well, why have folic acid then circulating throughout the body? And that's the other concern. Don't consume. If you've got this variation, I don't want you to consume junk anyway, but don't, if you've got the variant, I want you to avoid folic acid if you've got this MTHFR, because you're not going to convert it all into this active form of folate, what your methylation pathway actually needs. So that's why you see avoid folic acid in supplements if you have that variation. Supplements and fortified foods. If you see folic acid on a label, just put it back. If you have this variation, just put it back. All right, so now we're going to look at, for the MTR and MTRR, now we're going to look at the B12. We already looked at zinc. We already looked at riboflavin niacin. So let's hop over to the CNA again, and let's look at B12. So look at this person's B12. That's insufficient too. So, I'm able to then point out, well, look at these methylation nutrients. Not all of the methylation nutrients that are needed for the support the genes are insufficient for you, but you have some significant ones, B12, B9, magnesium, and methionine. So we know now that we need to intervene and make sure that this person is getting more of that, of those nutrients. So now the other thing is too, those of you, maybe you already know, you might have the COMT variation. The COMT at the top of the page. Notice that it is at the top of the page because it's important for you to address COMT first and support that first. Before you start taking, if you need to supplement with methylfolate, before you start taking any kind of methylated B vitamins. And those of you who've been working with practitioners, maybe you already were prescribed methyl B vitamins, and maybe you don't feel so great. And I would say, if that's the case, you might have the COMT variation, because people with the COMT variation, they don't tolerate they don't tolerate too many methyl B vitamins, especially too fast. So we very often suggest we don't suggest methyl B12. Those of you who are familiar with the different types of B12, we would suggest the hydroxycobalamin for you if you've got the COMT variant. So the point being, though, when I say this kind of stuff is, think about it. How would you know that if you didn't know that you had these genetic variations? You wouldn't. So this is helpful for the coaches at X Factor to know what forms of the nutrients, like if you do need a particular nutrient, you need more of it, and we know that by doing that cellular nutrition assay that we're going to go back to. We know that, but this here tells you, well, which forms of the nutrients would be best for you, would be better tolerated by you as well. So that is your methyl detox profile. Let's go back and go back to the beginning of the cellular nutrition assay. All right, so this test, we already looked at that. Obviously, we looked at methylation nutrients, but let's go back to the beginning and talk about what this test is about. All right, so that biochemistry, that biochemical pathway that I just showed you, that's one tiny little piece of biochemistry, right? So if you've been in practitioner offices and you see they have maybe big, huge biochemistry charts in their offices, which is great, but they're very intricate and ornate and complex. There's so much more to biochemistry than that pathway I showed you, right? It's a little piece of it. It's a very important piece. But my point of saying that is it all takes place inside of your cells, inside the cells. The nutrients that you consume, the nutrients that you need, they're doing their jobs inside the cells, inside the cells. When you get regular blood work, conventional blood work taken, uh, doctor takes your CBC, your metabolic panel, right? Well, maybe they throw in a vitamin D to be taken, or a B12, or an iron. They want to measure your iron. Keep in mind when you look at those nutrients, that is telling you what your nutrient status is outside of your cells, in your blood, being transported to your cells, hopefully, your tissues and your cells. But when you have that, when you get that test result, it's telling you what it was at that moment in time when it's traveling outside of the cells. And so it's outside the cells and it's short term. So it's what you've been consuming and maybe exposed to lately. This test is telling you what the nutrient status is inside of your cells, where all of the nutrients, as I said, do their jobs, where all of biochemistry happens, all of metabolism happens inside your cells. And this is also telling you long term. So this is a reflection of inside your cells, but also months leading up to the test. So, if you were to get, like, let's say you did this test and you got a serum vitamin D level taken, and this is not a good example here because this person's vitamin D status is good, but let's say your vitamin D was high or hovering, or like maybe like a 90. That's not high, that's okay, but it's still, getting high. Let's say it's high, but your vitamin D status here is not sufficient in this test. Well, how could that be? The people say, well, because that was telling you what it was in the serum, and this is telling you what it is in the cells. And if that happens again, that's going to tell me that you got some kind of genetic variations that's preventing that vitamin D to get activated into your cells. So keep that in mind too. It's like we look to see reasons for these insufficiencies before we know how to go about helping you replete these nutrients. So what they do here in this test is they take your lymphocytes. So your lymphocytes are your immune cells, a type of your immune cells. And they take one specimen of your lymphocytes first, and they add this thing to it called a mitosis generator. And what that does is it makes your cells multiply and divide and become more metabolically active. It increases, I know you've heard of this, mitochondria in your cells. It increases the number of mitochondria in your cells, which makes your cells, much more healthy when that happens. So they do that first to get what they call your baseline activity rate of your cells, because we're all different. So my rate is going to be different from yours, different from Jim's, different from Joe's. We're all different. So everybody who does this test acts as their own control. You are not compared to a sample population in this test because everybody needs a different amount of nutrients. One size does not fit all. So they do that first to get your baseline. Then what they do is they take 55 specimens of your cells, because on this page there are 55, look at this, 55 nutrients. And by the way, in the next few months, they're adding another 5 nutrients. So it's going to be up to 60 nutrients going to be tested. So take 55 specimens of your cells, and to each specimen, they will add a different nutrient. And then they watch to see what happens to it. So they'll add like biotin to the first one, then they add vitamin B2 to the next one, they add delta-tocotrienol to the next one. So the point is that's the only variable in every specimen is the addition of a different nutrient. And then they watch to see what happens to the activity of the cells. They always compare it to your baseline. So if you look at the bottom of the page here, you'll see that this key here, you see at the bottom of the page, they took your baseline up to 109%, and they call it, whenever something's in the green, it keeps the activity of the cells in that area 100 to 109% of your baseline. It means you got enough of that nutrient. And the way I always explain it is I'm saying, it's like your cells are saying, yeah, I'm good. This is doing nothing for me. I already have it. I'm good, right? I already have enough of this right now, anyway. I might not always have enough of this, but right now, in the last few months, last, 5 months or so, I've had enough of this nutrient. Now, whenever they add a nutrient and it enhance the activity of your cells, you see the 110 to 119% of your baseline, they call that a borderline insufficiency, and 120% or higher of your baseline, more significant insufficiency. And so what that nutrient addition did, is it increased the amount of your cells in the specimen. It increased the number of the mitochondria in your cells, so it made them healthy. So it increased the activity over your baseline. So that's a good response, but it also means that there was not enough of that particular nutrient in the original specimen. Otherwise, it would not have had that impact. So this is telling you, do you have enough or do you not have enough? And people say, oh, I want to know the number. I want to know how much of a nutrient. This type of test is not going to tell you that. This is a functional response test telling you, do you have enough or do you not have enough? It doesn't, the other thing it doesn't tell us is if there's too much of a nutrient. There's no test in the world that'll tell you if you got too much in the cells. So I wish, I keep telling to the scientists in the lab that they really need to develop a test like that, because that would be golden if we could determine that. But so then what we do is, oh, by the way, you see where it says insufficient. Insufficiency. We don't call anything deficiencies here because first of all, deficiency is a diagnosis and labs are not allowed to diagnose. But number two, you're not looking for overt symptoms of deficiencies. Like I always like to use vitamin C as the example because everybody knows deficiency of vitamin C is scurvy, right? You heard of scurvy, right? Well, you're not going to be looking for symptoms of scurvy if you have an insufficient vitamin C here, but consider it a subclinical deficiency. In other words, what's happening in the metabolism of your cells and what these nutrients are important for, the functions that those are going to be impacted, but you're not looking for really symptoms of really overt deficiencies. If we don't replete these nutrients, then that certainly could happen. But for the most part, you're looking at subclinical deficiencies here. But then what we do is look for patterns and what these nutrient insufficiencies are indicating, because we want to know, we want to kind of try to figure out the reasons for the insufficiencies, because that'll help us to know, well, how should we best go about repleting them? Well, could it be that it's the person's intake? They're just not consuming enough of a particular nutrient because they're just not eating any good food sources of them. It could be that, and that's easy. We just have to direct them to start eating those foods. Could it be that they are not digesting, absorbing assimilating those nutrients into the cells because of poor digestion? Could it be that they are taking medications that interfere with nutrients? And we all know, I know the medications, might be necessary, but every medication interferes with something when it comes to a nutrient. So could it be that? Or could it be that there are genetic variations like we just talked about with the MTHFR, for example, that could be preventing the active form of the nutrient to be activated into the cell? Or could it be a combination of these? Right. So that's the kind of thing like we think about. And that's why we think, all right, well, yeah, I need to know how the person eats. We need to know what supplements they're taking. So again, patterns is what we look for. Now, some questions or comments that we typically get. Oh, come on. How could I possibly have a problem with, let's say, biotin? I supplement with biotin, they might say. I'll say, well, number one, it's not all about biotin. It's not all about supplementation, but how long have you been doing that? Well, I started supplementing a month ago. All right. Well, this test is a reflection of many months leading up to the test. So that 1 month of supplementing is not going to make that difference in this type of a test. So that's the person might continue to do it. It just might not have been long enough to see. But some of the patterns that I look for is, to help to know, we customize supplement routines based on these test results too. We can create the actual custom blend compounded supplement too, based on these on test results here. But, not necessarily only including the nutrients that you see here. I want to figure out, well, what's happening? All right. So the first thing I would say to this person is, well, look at all the amino acids that are insufficient. It's not only the ones that are in the yellow and the green, I'm sorry, the yellow and the red, but what about the ones that are high green? So there's couple more. So I would say to this patient, hey, do you eat enough protein? Yeah, that's where we get amino acids. I always assume that the person's eating a lot of protein because, but I ask just in case. Every so often someone will say no, but because it just seems to be that everybody's on protein, protein, protein these days because people are kind of, being steered away from carbohydrate. So it's not necessarily that. Are you having enough variety of protein? No. All right. Are you a vegetarian? And I'm not against vegetarianism because I pretty much am myself, but methionine being insufficient is not uncommon in people who are vegetarian because there's not a lot of methionine coming from vegetarian sources of protein. So I ask these questions. If someone says to me, oh my gosh, I eat protein all the time and I eat a huge variety of protein. Okay, well, then what it appears to be then is you need some digestive support. You need some enzymes. You need some enzymes to help to break down this protein that you're eating to extract these amino acids from the food because you're eating so much protein that we need. That's probably what the culprit is. The other thing could be that the person doesn't have enough acid in the stomach. We need to, and just, as we get older, we produce less digestive enzymes. We produce less, gastric acid. So that very often is one of the contributing factors. So we really try to get to the root causes of why this person has these insufficiencies. So once again, it's not about just having the, let's supplement the nutrients, supplement. No, absolutely I want to supplement, but not necessarily only the nutrients here that are insufficient. Keep in mind that nutrients work together, right? So look at this person's copper. I would say, okay, well, my first question to this person would be, hey, do you supplement with zinc? Oh yeah, I take they might say I take, lots of zinc. All right, well, do you take any copper? No, I only take zinc. Well, anytime you take zinc, you always want to be taking copper and vice versa because too much zinc throws off copper. Too much copper throws off zinc. They counteract each other. So I would be asking something. So again, we ask questions to see what's going on. Now, I would also wonder about this person and you've probably heard of dysbiosis, unfriendly bacteria in the gut, right? So I would ask about that. Why? Because I'm seeing a pattern here. The biotin is manufactured in the gut by friendly bacteria. The vitamin B9 also can be manufactured in the gut by friendly bacteria. The MK4, yeah, no, but MK7, so this person is fine for MK7. But then unfriendly bacteria in the gut tends to use up minerals. So what I see, this person doesn't have that many minerals, but when I do see more than this, I often think, yeah, I wonder if there's dysbiosis, at least starting, right? Because this person needs copper, needs lithium, needs magnesium. But again, we try to correlate this with what the person is reporting when it comes to symptoms and medical conditions. What else do I want to say about, histidine. You see histidine under amino acids. Okay, so histidine is an amino acid that converts to histamine. So this person, it's the same person who did this last test, the methyl detox that I showed you. Well, remember, this person has a number of variations in the methylation pathway. Remember, I mentioned histamine clearance is impacted by the methylation pathway. So when histidine is insufficient, it makes us suspect that this person has high histamine in the body because histidine converts to histamine. So if we have high histamine levels, it's using up this amino acid histidine. So I'll ask the patient that, and they might say, "Oh my gosh, yeah, I have terrible allergies," or it might not even just be like the typical symptoms of, you know, allergies and sinus issues, but it could also be gas and bloating and digestive issues. That could be a reflection of a histamine intolerance in the gut. So, you know, we ask those kind of questions. Glutathione, you might be familiar with. You know, it's called the master antioxidant. But take a look at this. All right, why is the glutathione? All right, well, the first thing I would wonder about is, does this person have a lot of exposure to free radicals? You know, we're going to talk about that. Toxins. How about mold? Has this person been exposed to mold? That's not an uncommon thing with glutathione being insufficient like that. But the other thing is, look at cysteine up above, cysteine and glycine underneath the amino acids. And glutamine too, but glutamine here for this person is fine. But cysteine, glycine, and glutamine, they make glutathione. So something's going on using up this glutathione, which in turn is likely using up the cysteine and the glycine. So again, finding out reasons for these insufficiencies as we also work to replete. So those are some of the things that, by the way, lithium insufficient for this person, that works in the methylation pathway too, just not on the genes that I mentioned. So lithium is, you know, as you know, a mineral. Not uncommon for people to be insufficient in lithium if they live in dry areas, because lithium is less prevalent in the soil and the water supply from dry areas. But I look for patterns in blood sugar issues, inositol insufficient here, lipoic acid just about insufficient, glycine, that's a blood sugar, magnesium. That could be a blood sugar, you know, indication of somebody maybe had blood sugar issues and insulin resistant. I also look at chromium for that and vanadium. This person's fine though for that. So it doesn't have to be every single one of those nutrients. So that's your cellular micronutrient assay. Now this next part of this test is called the redox score and the antioxidant protection assay. So you've likely heard of free radicals. Free radicals come from being toxins, you know, excess alcohol, smoking. You know, actually a lot of stress it creates free radicals. Also exercise, you know, exercise is wonderful. And I know you're, you know, working with X Factor, you know, with trainer, you know, as your trainers, which is wonderful. Remember, if you're a big exercising person, you know, you probably need to antioxidize more than people who are not exercising near as much as you do. So anyway, we get these free radicals from our lifestyle factors, but also what's in our world, you know, toxins and pollution and smoking and so forth. So you know, what these free radicals do is they destroy our cells and make our cells die, and that increases the risk of chronic disease. Well, antioxidants you've heard of. You know, what antioxidants do is they neutralize these free radicals so they can't kill our cells. So that's why we need antioxidants. Well, this redox score is determining how well your cells are protecting themselves from free radical damage. So what they did was they purposely put this person's specimen of their cells in the state of oxidative stress, meaning they put a bunch of free radicals. They put a free radical generating system in the specimen of the cells. Actually what they use is hydrogen peroxide. So the hydrogen peroxide is going to work to make the cells die. So what they did is they let the cells incubate with this hydrogen peroxide for 2 days. So the way you look at this, I don't know if you can see it, this 98 here at the top, this person's redox score is really good. You don't see that very often, but you know, we all start off with 100% of our cells on day one, but after 2 days of being incubated, this person only lost 2% of the cells, went down to 98%, which is excellent. He's got an excellent redox score. And then, but you're not going to see that very much. You're going to see more in the 80s, 70s sometimes, you know, and we know that that needs to be improved. And then you see this red blue bar on the side here and that white diamond there. that's the person's 98 compared to a sample population. So this is the only part of the whole test that they compare to a sample population. So his score is great. So what I would say to this person is, okay, let's see how we can keep it that way. Let's keep your antioxidant capacity good. And that's what the next test will tell us. Now, most of the time I'm saying, let's see how we can get this better. But with this guy, I say, let's see how we can keep it that way. So the next test is very cool because we can individualize what antioxidants we suggest for the person, which ones are going to be the most protective. So what they did here is they took 49 specimens of the person's cells, and you look at the key on the bottom of the page, it's the same scoring, far left is in the baseline area, but it's just light blue in this test. The middle area is a little bit increase in the activity of the cells. The far right is a more significant increase in the activity of the cells. But the difference with this test is they have these 49 specimens of the cells, but the cells are still in the hydrogen peroxide, which is trying to make the cells die. So to each specimen, they add a different antioxidant nutrient or botanical to see which ones not only prevent the cells from dying and kept the activity of the cells in the baseline area, but which ones actually increased and improved the health and the activity of the cells, even while they were in this hydrogen peroxide, which was trying to make the cells die. So it's very cool because, what kind of, I have to say, what kind of makes someone like me as a nutritionist for many years cringe is when people say that they're taking mass quantities of supplements, and I'll say, well, how come? Oh, I read online it was good, it was healthy. Well, okay, well, let's just see if you need it. Why? You know what I mean? Let's just see. Let's individualize and see if it's really helping you. So I would choose from here and say, and the person would say to me, hey, should I take all of these? And the answer is no, no. There is such a thing as over antioxidation too. And that's the other thing. That's the other reason we cringe when people are taking a duffel bag worth of supplements without any guidance at all. And it happens a lot. But anyway, I would say, yeah, no, you're taking too much of certain things. But I would choose, my rule of thumb is to choose 4 from here. And I always choose nutrients first over the botanicals because I don't have to worry about people having sensitivities to the nutrients, where they could have sensitivities or they could have interference with medication with some of the botanicals. So I would always try to find 4 nutrients first in what's protective. So for this person, I would definitely choose glutathione. You see how glutathione is? Because the first assay told us he needed it. He didn't have enough. And this assay is telling us it's going to be really protective. So I'm going to choose that. I'm going to choose lipoic acid. That's a nutrient. What else is on here that I can choose? I would choose, yeah, now that's, I guess, the only nutrients that we got here. So then I would then try to choose 2 more botanicals. So I would probably do maybe, I would go with the highest protective ones, as long as I know he's not sensitive to them. If he did a food sensitivity test. So I would maybe go with boswellia for him. I would probably go with pycnogenol for him because it's highly protective. So this is how we can individualize. Now, a common question that we get, and you might actually be taking this, coenzyme Q10. Remember, this is not telling us if you don't have enough of something, because you could live the rest of your life and never take ginkgo ever. It's not an essential nutrient. So remember, this test is not telling us what you don't have enough of. It's telling us what's going to be protective. So when you look at like this person's coenzyme Q10, it's just, it's in the far, in the blue, and it didn't come out to be protective or highly protective. So the person might say, well, does this mean it's bad for me? And I said, no, it doesn't mean it's bad for you, but why are you taking it? Oh, because I read it was a good antioxidant. So I'd say, well, for you, let's get more bang for your buck and let's take something that's going to be more helpful, because no, coenzyme Q10 is not a great antioxidant for you right now. But if the person says, no, I'm taking it because I'm on a statin drug and I'm trying to improve my blood pressure and things like that. Oh, absolutely. There's other reasons of taking coenzyme Q10, but it's not a great antioxidant for this person. That's all. So anyway, that's a little bit about this. I think this test is really cool because we can individualize everything that we suggest as far as the nutrient supplementation as well as the antioxidants that we might suggest to support the antioxidant capacity. So that's the methyl detox profile and the cellular nutrition assay. So Jim and Joe, did you need me to go on to anything else, or do we have any questions, or I can keep going if you want. I could talk on that all.
Yeah. Well, I'm geeking out over here. I appreciate this every time I go through it more with you. So utilizing one of the things that I like really impress on our coaches and partners is that when we go through these tests, we want to make the information actionable. So having gone through these tests, now what would you recommend? So we do have the capability to custom compound. So what does that process look like?
Okay, so well, so I'm going to show you too. I pulled up a custom blend that I made for myself. So what we're very used to as nutritionists is we use professional lines of supplements because keep in mind with regard to supplementation, they're really, really not. I mean, they kind of are regulated by the FDA, but really only if that company gets audited. And the FDA doesn't really have enough auditors. But really, the supplement companies do not have to prove that the amount of what they say is in there. They have to prove if they get audited, they have to prove that, let's say if I say vitamin D is in my supplement, I have to prove that there's vitamin D in there. But they do not have to prove that the amount of vitamin D that they say is in there. So when you do like the consumer labs, consumer reports, consumer labs is a great resource because they will they'll take a whole bunch of supplements and analyze them. Well, I'll never forget, and they've done this actually recently too. They'll take a boatload of vitamin D off the shelves and, they test them and they test to see how much vitamin D is actually in there compared to what the manufacturer says is in there. And it's like, I don't know. Very, very low percentage has the amount that they say is in there. Most of them say that, some of them really have like 20% of what they say is in there. Some of them like 50%. Nobody has like 100%. So it's really pretty bad. So keep that in mind when you're just, buying supplements, at the drugstore. We really wouldn't be suggesting that. Definitely not like a dollar store or any place like that. You want a professional line. So we're used to doing that because we know that these manufacturers do the right thing. They do the research. They do batch testing to prove that everything that they say is in there is in there. They do the right forms of the nutrients. They don't have junk. They don't put dyes. Well, some of them do, but you don't want to have dyes in your supplements, things like that. So we use professional lines, but still, as nutritionists trying to put together a plan and a supplement plan, especially when you're working with sensitivities like we do, I'd say, oh my gosh, this here, I want to suggest this multivitamin for this person. It's got the right folate, got the right B12, got the right amount of everything I want. Ah, never mind. I can't suggest this because it has beef in it, and this person has a sensitivity to beef. Oh, this has the wrong type of B12, or this, So I mean, in other words, we're constantly looking for a bunch of different products to meet the patient's needs. This, however, is ideal because we go into this platform and we create the supplement. This is how much zinc I want to put in. This is how much copper I want to put in because I'm suggesting zinc. This is how much manganese and quercetin I'm going to, because I'm okay with quercetin. This is how much vitamin D. So we create it. And it's just so liberating because it's just like I know that this person's getting the right dose of everything, and it's just no supplement like it anywhere in the world because I created this one blend. So this is an ideal thing to do. My team and I, we see people individually for nutrition therapy, but as part of a nutrition plan, we always create a supplement routine as part of their overall nutrition plan. We do the food plan, the meal planning tools, but we do the supplement routine as well. So it's always part of it. But then people can just have us do this too, just create the supplement for them. They don't have to be working with us formally to just do the supplement routine. We can create that. We can work with X Factor to create the blend for each client. So That's, we would ask for a health questionnaire. So we have everything in writing because we want to know everything about you. We want to know what medical conditions you have. Are you a healthy eater? Do you follow any special eating pattern? Are you a vegetarian? Do you have to take any medications? What supplements do you take? And we'd ask you to list all the supplements you take and the exact brands so that the nutritionist can look to see what's in all the brands that you take because, she'll look at your cellular nutrition assay and she might say, oh, okay, well, this multivitamin was working for the vitamin B2. Okay, so if this patient wants to set aside that multivitamin, then that nutritionist will put that same amount of vitamin B2 that's been working in the last 6 months. So in other words, we want everything. We want all the information to really make this a nice, safe supplement plan. So we would ask you to fill out that questionnaire and give us all the supplements you take, and then we would create the blend along with X Factor, and you could order that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I would like everybody to know is when you go through these tests, one of the options through your coach or your trainer is to sign up for the consultation and also to have this custom tailored formula developed for you based on these tests. And keep in mind, we are not the physician, we're not doctors. That's why we partner with Cell Science. That's why we partner with Amy and her nutritionist to get the person with the right training to review the test and to help guide us down the right path to creating these formulas. I do have a question for you, Amy, that I'm sitting here. I listened to the Dr. Grabowski talking about GLP-1s, and I can tell you that that's an opinionated topic, and I think that while I personally, my feeling is you should do everything with diet, nutrition, exercise first. I think there are some use cases where they may be necessary or helpful. But one of the things that Dr. Grabowski talked about was the nutritional deficiencies that they create. And so
Absolutely.
tell me and our audience a little bit about GLP-1s, methylation, and the CNA, and how we might be able to help them with that person who's decided their physician's recommended and they are taking the GLP-1 protocol. How can we help them be healthier through that process?
Well, first of all, I would say before, if possible, before they even go down that road, what I'd like to see is let's do this test because here's what happens when I'm reviewing tests with practitioners for their patients, and they'll say, "Oh, this patient's on a GLP-1." I'm like, "Oh, how long?" "Oh, I just put this person on it 2 weeks ago, right?" And then I'm like, "Okay, well." Did you see the chromium? Did you see the vanadium? Did you see the delta tocotrienol? Did you see the inositol? We could have done so much for this person to help with their insulin resistance because look at all the nutrients that were insufficient that have everything to do with insulin resistance. No wonder they're walking around with a lot of insulin and they got this, a huge amount of this fat storing hormone circulating throughout the body. So, I mean, that's where, I don't necessarily say it like that, but I'm thinking, boy, I really wish I would have been
Sure.
able to have, that this patient would have done this test before going on the GLP-1. But the thing is with the GLP-1s is exactly what you're saying is, well, person's not hungry, and that's the whole goal, right? The person's not hungry, so they're eating less. So when they do eat, what we find anyway is they're not going to go for the vegetables, they're not going to go for, they're going to go for their familiar favorites, which may not be the healthiest choices. The longer that they're on the GLP-1s, the more nutrient insufficiencies that we see because they're not eating. So it's absolutely supplementation would definitely be in order. And in that scenario, what I would say is if they do this test, that's a start. But I mean, after they've been on the GLP-1s, but even the ones that are in the green, that came out to be in the green, I would put into their supplementation because I know that the more and more months that go on, they're not going to be eating. They're going to be eating so little. Plus the side effects, the nausea and the constipation is a huge one too. So again, people are just not eating a lot, and they're not, because they're not hungry, so they're not nourishing their bodies properly. So that's what you end up seeing. Then you end up seeing indications of uh, gut, poor gut health. And, so when I see a lot of the, amino acids, yeah, sure enough, okay, because the person's not eating a lot, but at the same time, the GLP-1s have a lot to do, will end up impacting gut health because it slows the gastric emptying. It's really, slowing what your normal pace of the gastric emptying in your stomach. And that does impact downstream, impacts your gut health, your microbiome. It impacts the gut permeability. You've heard of leaky gut and the increased gut permeability. It impacts all that. So then, again, the longer then they're on these, then the more gut issues that we see. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that tends to be the patterns that we see. And I just kind of wish that that before the patient goes on these, that let's do this first and see if any of the nutrient patterns that we're seeing are really contributing to the weight difficulties, the digestion and so forth. But if they're already on it, I think what I would be saying is whatever you're choosing food wise, you got to make it, you got to make it count.
Right.
There's no room for cookies. If you Yeah,
Right.
there really isn't. You
Yeah.
have to make it count with whatever you're putting into your body because you're eating so little. And then, of course, it becomes important to do a good custom supplementation. Like I said, even if a lot of the nutrients come out in the green, I know they're not going to be eating the same as they have been in the last few months moving forward. So I would put more into their custom blend, assuming that they're not going to be eating much. Then the other thing is things like smoothies if they're not hungry, like sipping on really good power smoothies. There's going to be really good, good clean protein powder in there with some, frozen fruits and vegetables, and so sipping on that throughout the day because at least, that's going to be easier for them to sip on it, and that actually might help with the digestion a little bit too because it's more liquid. But of course, it's going to be, packed with a lot of nutrients in a smaller volume too.
Sure, sure. One of the things in the chat, Mandy is asking is it true that once you're on a GLP-1 that you have to be on it for the rest of your life? I've read that. I don't know how much of that is social media and how much of that is true. I don't imagine you have to be, but I'm
No, you
assuming
never
that,
have to be, but I think, yeah, I think what the question is as soon as you go off of it, are you going to regain? And
yeah,
that's,
almost guaranteed. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I've
So,
been,
so
yeah,
as what I say about the GLP-1s is, well, even when you're on it, you still have to eat plenty of protein, because if you're losing weight, as you know, if you're losing weight and you're not exercising and you're not eating enough protein, you're going to have weight loss, but you're going to have muscle loss. And,
right,
and that's not the kind of weight that you want to lose, obviously, right? So that's what's going to happen. And in turn, it's just to me, it's just like, why nutritionists like me have been against dieting all of our careers
right,
because
right,
dieting doesn't work. You just follow this, restricted plan. You don't couple with exercise like you should. You don't eat enough protein, and then you lose muscle mass. But when you regain that weight, it's not going to be regained in muscle. It's going to be regained in fat. So this person just increased the percentage of fat. So that's my concern is if we're not, still when they're on the GLP-1, we still need to eat enough protein. We still need to exercise and do that strength training, and, to me, that's so important that they need to understand because if they're not doing it, yeah, they might lose weight, but
yeah.
it's not going to be the right type of weight.
Well, I think that's you're preaching to the choir, of
Right.
course, right? For
Of
some of
course.
us, some of our guests on the call, I hope that lands appropriately. I know that there are some folks on the call up in age like myself. I'm getting up there, but so you mentioned strength training and exercise and protein and muscle. So from your perspective in the nutrition and dietitian realm, what is the appropriate age range or forever? Is it to continue to do strength focused or, training exercise? Is it as easy as just going for a walk?
You guys are the exercise experts, right?
Right.
Well,
That's
I
why I
would
said from the nutrition standpoint.
no, well, I think, yeah, certainly going for a walk is great as long as we're getting the heart rate up, right? And we're, getting it to the target range and getting a little out of breath, having a difficult time talking. I think that's important. But then, yeah, I mean, I think the weights are really important. Age-wise, I feel like it's any age we should be still being able to lift weights
Move.
and
Yeah.
to do that, right? And
Movement.
yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I don't think we should ever stop exercising,
Yeah.
unfortunately. If I were making up the rules, we would be able to, but I don't think we
Well, what other questions do you have, folks on the
You know
the
what? I'm
call?
going to jump in real quick. Just myself personally, I did my cellular nutrition test while I was in show prep in bodybuilding. And I was eating 2,400 calories, and I was pretty insufficient in a lot of things at 2,400 calories.
Yeah.
So you go back to your question, Jim, about, GLP-1s. I mean, the average person's, 600 to 1,000 calories. There's just no possible way that they're going to have adequate levels on that. So that's something to kind of think about. The redox score, guys, talking about wasting your money on supplements. That gentleman had an awesome score and he had many, many protective ingredients. I had 5 on that entire list. I had 5 items that were protective and they were nothing that I was taking. Well, caveat that to a little bit, but I was taking acai, elderberry, turmeric, rhodiola, and milk thistle. Why? Because they're very, very popular items. None of them were even remotely protective for me
As an antioxidant.
as
Right.
an antioxidant.
Mhm.
Now, going on to, again, we didn't talk about food sensitivities, but turmeric caused an inflammatory response or an immune response. And, Amy, kind of following up, I did my show. It was the only prep I ever did in my life. Nothing hurt, nothing ached. I didn't hold on to, I mean, it was, I did it to the T. And, and that's where people are, that's what she's talking about, where people are just popping supplements because they read that they're good. Guys, I had 5 on that entire, mine was like the worst. I have never seen 5 ever, on all the tests I've ever ran. At least most people have like 10 or more. I had 5.
Mhm.
And one of them being actually anti productive, not anti-oxidative. I do have a question, Amy.
Sure.
We hear this all the time, mutations. I have the MTHFR mutation.
Yeah, that's an incorrect term.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, that's why, it's just, I mean, there are such a thing as mutations in the genes, but it's actually a little bit more, it's more significant than a little variation, right? So, this is why, the language that they use, it doesn't say you have one or more mutations, it's variations. So it's just it's not a correct term. There is such a thing, like I said, a mutation in genes, but it's not like this. It's
Yeah.
definitely much more significant. And there was something else that you reminded me about that. But yeah, and then like, I really wish practitioners would not use that.
Very, very popular people on, social media call them mutations all the time.
I know.
Another one too, like, what do you say? I know more now, but when people just say it's okay, I take methylated vitamins.
Yeah. Um, Okay, well, I would say, first of all right, but how much? Let's find out if you're taking enough. Let's do the test and see if it's right for you. But I would also ask, well, okay, how do you feel? Because when people take the methylated Bs, well, I think I might have mentioned, like, when people see the results here, and then they say, oh, methyl address the need for, oh yeah, I'm just gonna take methylfolate. I'm just gonna take methyl B12. Well, that's not necessarily the
Right.
right type, the right form. And, have you been feeling since you've been taking that, and again, and I know, too, you've heard this, but people say, oh my gosh, my panic is through the roof. I can't sleep. I'm more irritable than ever. It can be disastrous if a person's doing too much. So I would say, well, let's find out. Let's do a nutrient test. Let's find out, do you have enough in your cells? First of all, I would ask the patient how the patient feels since you've been doing that. And then it's just kind of a way to find out if is it too much too, because again, you can over methylate. Too much
Yeah.
methylation is not good. And when I say that, because I didn't mention this, but this pathway goes on to, where it says methylation of DNA. That means that it impacts how your genes are expressed. This pathway, the methyl groups, which is a very basic compound, CH3. I always talk about how water is such a basic compound, H2O, everybody knows what water is. Well, just as basic, CH3 is just as basic as H2O, but you can't live without it, just like we can't live without H2O. Well, these methyl groups, when they go on to do their things after this pathway, they touch on your DNA, they touch on your genes, and they impact how your genes are expressed, whether they're turned on, whether they're turned off. And you might say, well, who cares? Well, too much methylation, hypermethylation tends to turn certain genes off. And there are certain genes that we don't want to be turned off. And just one example, the tumor suppressor genes. The genes,
Right.
tumor suppressor genes. So, it's too much, again, it's not just that easy to say, oh yeah, let me just take mass quantities of methyl B12 and methylfolate, which is a lot of times what practitioners do, and it drives me crazy. Oh, I did this test, yeah, and then my doctor suggested 5 grams 5,000 milligrams, 5 grams of methylfolate. I'm like, what? I would have suggested 800 micrograms. Are you kidding me? So have you been feeling since then? I don't feel good at all. Okay, well, I don't think that's right for you. I think it's too much, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is there a test that can zero in more definitively on the quantity?
No, I don't know of any test that tells us if we got too much of a particular nutrient. I wish. I think that would be wonderful.
So
But
with
there
the
are methylation. There are some methyl. And by the way, you probably know that we were acquired by Genova Laboratories.
Yep.
So they have a methylation test that we're going to be able to add some features to this. And there are some type of biomarkers that we could test that I believe it's in one of their tests that will tell us if the person is hypermethylating. So I
Oh,
could,
that's pretty cool.
I don't quote me on that, but I'm just thinking that that's what it is. I haven't been able to look into it yet, but.
And then can you touch base really kind of briefly on, say, folic acid, maybe too much? What are some maybe side effects or maybe some issues that arise with that neurotransmitter aspect of folic acid?
Yes. Okay. So you see this folic acid here down here on the bottom left. Remember, that's the inactive form of vitamin B9. The cells can't use it. Can't use it. So it's got to go through this conversion process to get to be the active form of the folate, which is what you see in the green outline box, methylfolate. So somebody's got this MTHFR variation like this person does. The enzyme activity is significantly, it's not gone. It's not like there's no enzyme activity, but it's significantly reduced. So if this person were to take in folic acid, he might metabolize some of it into the active form, but he's not going to metabolize all of it. And what the problem with that is then is what they call unmetabolized folic acid. In other words, it's just out there. It's just circulating throughout the body. And this is new. This is a new concern. So I don't know enough about it yet. But what I have read so far is they are seeing unmetabolized folic acid in the spinal cord of children with autism. So there's something associated there. And also they're seeing association with cognitive decline as we get older. So that's really all I really know about it at this point. It's just kind of a new concern that they're studying. So that's why we say, if you got the MTHFR variation, do not take folic acid. Just, you're not going to convert it all into the active form. Now, if the person is green for the MTHFR, right, no variation, they'll convert it. they'll convert it as long as they've got the other nutrients that are important, for it. Is it going to hurt them to take methylfolate and avoid folic acid? No. I still would probably tell them to avoid it, but I wouldn't tell them to take mass quantities of the methylfolate.
Right.
So I wouldn't be as concerned about the person who's green for MTHFR with eating foods. Now, yes, I would because it's still junk. But if they were supplementing with the folic acid, I wouldn't be as concerned.
Right. With the CNA test, so we've talked and you've told me on consults before, what is the recommended retest, right? So so we dial in, we get their nutrition figured out, but then through rotational foods, diet, and different seasons, right? And getting things, improved. How often should somebody retest to check in on how their cellular nutrition is doing?
We would say no sooner than 6 months. Uh, because just like this test is a reflection of months leading up to the test, like, some people will say, 5 months, some say 6, some say 9, it depends. But just know it's long term. But it would probably, it does take a good amount of months to be doing the right thing nutritionally, with, the trainer's guidance, nutritionally, food and supplementation to see that repletion.
Okay.
So we would say 6 months.
Okay. I wanted to clarify something I heard Dr. Grabowski say back to the GLP-1s and being nutrient deficient. Um, I forget what, and that's why I want to ask. He cited a study where he was a part of or read something of that a 2,000 calorie diet, anything less, was very hard to get a complete nutritional profile from.
Meaning it's not
So
easy to really nourish even if a person is eating perfectly, in other words, and it's at a 2,000, like you need to be eating like 2,000 calories, right? Is that what you're saying?
yeah,
Yeah.
he cited a study that they worked on, and it was hard for them to show a nutritional diet with less than 2,000 calories. And I mean, the GLP-1s get people down into the, sub 1,000,
Yep,
and then the extreme dieters, you get 1,200, 1,400, and
exactly.
that just becomes mathematics to weight loss. But what I want everybody to hear and know is nutritionally, you're playing with fire.
Right. At the expense of good nutrition, to lose weight. So this is what, um, for sure. And it used to be back in the day. Remember, I've been a nutritionist for 40 years, and 1,200 calories was the minimum that you needed. But you had to, if you're eating 1,200 calories, you had to eat perfectly to just get everything that you needed. Now, of course, back then we didn't have tests like this. So, I mean, that was back then. So who knows what the nutrition status really was. But yeah, I believe it now, especially nowadays with the nutrient supply, in the fruits and vegetables, for example, because the soil quality is so different, what people are choosing with conventional versus organic, things like that. So yeah, I mean, it would be really tough to do that. So I can see why that would be nowadays at a 2,000 calorie eating pattern. But yeah, I mean, when people diet and to me, when they follow crazy diets too, with I mean, some of them, if it's, if a person's eating nothing but meat all day long, I'm sorry, you're gonna have a horrible gut. You're gonna have a
Right.
horrible gut integrity. You're gonna have dysbiosis. You're gonna have unfriendly bacteria. There's nothing to feed friendly bacteria when you're just eating meat. So we
Right.
have to have a nice variety. So yeah, when people, the desire to lose weight, I get it. When we need, that's important. It's absolutely important to do that. But, we need to do it in a health promoting way, and also in a way that, your eating pattern that you can sustain.
Yep.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
if it's just
100%.
another diet, oh, it worked for me. Well, no, it didn't work for you because it didn't keep the weight off.
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, do we have any questions out there? Everybody's being a little quiet, and I'm sure this is a topic that is many people have questions. I know you do. Anybody willing to speak up? Any questions out there?
Or put them in the chat, either way.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say, which I didn't talk about, but like looking at the ALCAT test for food sensitivities, when people, that's another thing, because especially with weight management, people might say, how could food sensitivity, people, when they think of food sensitivities, they just think of, oh, that's going to impact my digestive symptoms. I don't have any problems with that. They might say, no, you know what I mean? Anyone would do well with having a food sensitivity test because it's identifying the foods that are contributing to inflammation. So I always like to show this graphic. That's what this test does. So just to kind of tie it back to the weight management, when your cells, they're looking at other white blood cells. When your neutrophils, the white blood cells are reacting like this, they're bursting essentially when you're consuming foods that you're sensitive to, and they're releasing inflammatory substances into the gut and into the circulation. And then check out all the things that this could lead to, whether a person feels symptoms or not. Inflammation is happening. So inflammation, biggest contributing factor to the health problems in our country, right? And we don't always feel inflammation, but this is what's happening when we're eating sensitive foods that we're sensitive to. And then you talk about, we talk on back to the weight management topic, just eating the foods that you're sensitive to works against your weight loss efforts. So here again, before people go on GLP-1s, in fact, I have a patient who she was thinking about doing it, going on the GLP-1s, and she decided to start working with us instead. She did all these tests. She did methyl detox, she did CNA, and she did the ALCAT test. And oh my gosh, almost over, within the first week, her digestion, she went from going to, having a bowel movement 3 times a week to having a bowel movement every day in a week, which is amazing. And then, we really should go more than once a day. But then she started going even twice a day. She was like, I can't believe this, right? And of course, the
Right.
reason she really wanted it was to lose weight. Well, it was slow because she's a small person. She's not, and she's probably she's like a little older than I am. So I'm like, look, as you get older, you put out less energy. You use up less energy to just exist and live and breathe. It just happens. And
Right.
then even though we're exercising, we're putting out less energy as we exercise than we did when we were 20. I said, so that's part of it. I said, just be patient. Just be patient, because think about this. What is the alternative? What are you going to do? Go follow a diet that you did, as you've dieted all your life. There's nothing that you're doing that's incorrect. You're nourishing your body properly. You're only putting into your body foods that are not provoking inflammation. So the best anti-inflammatory eating pattern is one that's individualized for person, removing all their sensitive foods.
Yep.
Well, she's been doing it for like 6 months, and she is still keeps in touch with me. And she was like, "You're not gonna believe it." She's, "Oh my gosh, I did what you said. I set up the scale. I just went by how I'm feeling in my clothes." And she said, "I can't believe I can fit in my clothes." And she said, "I decided to get on a scale even though you told me not to." And she said, "I'm like down like 11 pounds." I'm like, "See what I mean? And you did it right." I said, "But that's the thing when you're doing it slowly, you're
Right.
using the right kind of weight, and it's gonna stay off too."
Yep, exactly.
Right.
So, it's hard. It's hard to be patient, I know. But those clients who have not maybe investigated this kind of thing and are trying to manage weight, I would highly recommend this because the food sensitivity test too, all this test. But because what happens is when we consume our reactive foods, these inflammatory substances that are being released from the cell here, they circulate throughout the body and they get to the cell membranes. And we talked about insulin resistance. They gravitate to the cell membranes and they make the cells resist the action of insulin. And then, the insulin can't take the glucose out of the blood to the cells. And remember, even protein, 50% of the protein converts to glucose too. So it's not just about carbohydrate, but it can't take the glucose into the cells. Well, then the pancreas responds by putting out more and more and more and more and more insulin to overwhelm the cells to shove the sugar in. Okay, well, you know, that happened from being insulin resistant, and these inflammatory substances released from the cells, you know, contribute to insulin resistance. So
Right.
again, another reason for doing a test like this.
Right. Well, I don't see any questions in the chat. This is the last chance. Amy, this information always, I geek out over it. I thank you so much. It's kind of fun. This kind of stuff and spreadsheets for me. So I can, you know,
That's funny.
but I appreciate it. If there's any final words or questions, speak now, forever hold your peace. Otherwise, for those of you that are in attendance, you can get a copy sent to you. Just reach out to myself or Parks or Joe or whomever invited you. Amy, thank you again so very much.
You're so
Always,
welcome. Thank
always
you
a
for having
pleasure.
me.
You
Thank you so
bet.
much for having me.
We appreciate you, Amy. Thank you.
I appreciate you too. Thank you, everybody. It was so nice being with you tonight. I hope to talk to you again.
Thank you.